Hey, this week we started out the Balanced series talking about how we can gain and maintain financial stability, which is really important in lots of ways. We started out by talking about these principles of physical balance. We talked about the thing that you need to have a reference point. And I had this stick I was balancing, was talking about that I've got to focus on the top of that stick. There's a big dollar sign on the top of the stick. And so that's really what we drilled down on during yesterday's message. We're going to break out the rest of those principles later, but we also talked about that there has to be constant corrections. As you're seeing what's going on up there, you constantly have to be changing what you're doing here with your hand to keep something in balance. And we also talked about that there has to be a clear objective, especially if somebody's walking on a tightrope. They need to know where they're going. They need to know where they're headed, what their direction is, have a plan for where they're headed. So we're incorporating those principles into these messages. And yesterday we really talked about that idea of a reference point. We started with Matthew chapter 25, talking about the parable that Jesus gave about the master that went away and left all of his resources with several of his servants. And he picked out 3 servants, and he gave 5 bags of gold to one, 2 bags of gold to another, and 1 bag of gold to the last one. And it said that he gave it based on their abilities, which is really interesting because he must have looked at how they've managed things in the past and decided how much he could entrust to them. And in the end, when he came back, the guy with 5 bags of gold had used that to develop into 10 bags of gold. The guy with 2 had now had 4, but the guy with 1 he still only had the 1. And so as the master comes back, it says he settled accounts. And so that really tells us something interesting about this. Is this was never these guys' money. Like, this wasn't their money. This was still his money. They were managing on his behalf. And it also says that when you're managing something on somebody else's behalf, there has to be a high degree of accountability. And so he comes back and he holds them accountable. We would expect that, right? I mean, if we put our money in the bank, we want to know exactly to the penny how much money we have there. They need to be able to tell us that. They can't look at us and say, well, you gave us the money, so, what difference does it make? Why do you need to know, where it is or how much you have? We would say, because it's still our money. You're managing it for us. And so the principle that Jesus shows us here is that we're managing God's resources, the resources that God gives us to manage on His behalf. And so there needs to be an accounting. So how are we going to be able to account for for the resources that God has given us and how we've used it? Well, we've got to be able to focus on that reference point. We've got to constantly be knowing where our money's going, and that's where our bottom line was this last week. We've got to be knowing where our money's going, and so we have to keep an eye on that at all times in order to know how to make the adjustments that we need to make in our finances. And so basically what we encouraged people to do yesterday is start right now, start this week keeping a spending report and just writing down everything that you're spending. And what we said is by the end of this week, by Thursday, the end of this week, you can email us, use the contact on the website, use the contact form on the website. Let us know you've kept your spending report for this week, and we'll put you in a drawing. So it will start to pay off possibly this Sunday, although it could pay off over your entire life if you start keeping the spending report and figuring out where you stand financially. Where is my money going? And so that's what we talked about in week 1. We're going to get into talking about this coming week. We're going to talk about a clear objective, and then we're going to take a couple weeks to talk about those constant adjustments that we need to make in order to keep things where they need to be and maintain balance. So it's a great series. I would encourage you to go out and catch that entire message from Sunday out online because it's going to be a huge help to you as we get into the other weeks as well.